There's a community of modern-day cowboys chasing the horizon. But on certain highways, under certain moons, some of those trucks, they just vanish. Not a trace left behind. No wreck, no fuel spill, no goodbye. They simply become a part of the road itself. This isn't a collection of campfire tales. It's a descent into the real, terrifying truth behind the legends of disappearing rigs and phantom convoys. Welcome to a 60-minute journey where the asphalt is a living thing and the shadows are a roadmap to a chilling new reality. What you're about to hear will make you question every empty stretch of road, every phantom headlight, and every sound in the silent dark. Dust. It was the kind of place where every trucker knew every other trucker by the sound of their rig, and the old man in the corner, with a face like a road map of bad decisions, had earned his right to speak. He was talking to a young driver, just a kid really, about a run he was about to make down Route 666. Not the new interstate, but the old, forgotten one, the stretch where the asphalt hummed a different tune. "You listen close, son," the old man rasped, his voice a low rumble like an idling diesel engine. "That highway's got a memory. It don't forget nothing, and it don't let nobody go." He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the young driver. All the scary trucker stories real-life truckers tell about the rigs that just vanished, most of them started on that road. It's not about the turns or the weather. It's about what you feel in your bones when you're out there alone. The road, it watches you. He gestured with a gnarled hand, mimicking a vast, unseen presence. The young driver, cocky and full of miles, just laughed it off. He had a delivery to make, a tight deadline, and no time for old ghost stories. He pushed back from the table, paid his bill, and headed for his rig. The old man's words hung in the silence. He watched the young driver climb into his cab, his laughter a fading echo against the rising roar of his engine. "He'll learn," the old man mumbled to his half-empty mug. "They all do, one way or another." The young driver, now on the road, felt the subtle shift. The trees seemed taller, the darkness deeper, and the highway, once a simple ribbon of pavement, felt like a living thing. The old man's warning, once dismissed, now felt like a lead weight in his stomach. The radio crackled with static. He was alone, and the night was just beginning. The old man's words would become his only lifeline. Trucker, now miles deep into Route 666, tried to shake the feeling of being watched. He cranked the volume on his radio, searching for a station, any station, but all he got was a low, guttural static that seemed to breathe with the road. That's when he saw them in his rearview mirror, a pair of headlights, a single point of light in the inky blackness. They were too far away to be a threat, but they seemed to hold a strange, unblinking intensity. He pressed the accelerator, pushing his rig to a speed that felt reckless on the deserted highway. He checked his mirror again. The lights were closer now, much closer, but he hadn't heard an engine, hadn't felt the whoosh of wind as a semi passed him. This wasn't a fellow trucker. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The lights behind him were now a distinct pair, but their light was wrong somehow, too soft and too old to be from a modern rig. As he rounded a long bend, he saw the road ahead was empty, a long, lonely stretch of pavement under a sliver of moon. He checked his mirror one last time before his heart seized in his chest. The lights were gone. The road behind him was just as empty as the road ahead. But just as he let out a shaky breath, he saw them again. Not in his mirror, but ahead of him, on the rise of the next hill. A set of ghostly headlights, bobbing and weaving as if carried by the wind. The shape of a massive semi was barely visible in the faint light. He knew for sure, now this was a highway horror stories legend coming to life. He slammed on the brakes, his rig screaming in protest, but the phantom truck just kept on its path, disappearing over the crest of the hill as if it were never there. The driver was alone again, but the silence was now a form of torture. Its headlights cut through the fog, but there was no engine. Lights a ghost in his peripheral vision, a constant threat that never quite materialized. The silence of the night was replaced by a low, persistent thrumming that seemed to come from the very road itself. He needed a break, a place to reset, to convince himself that what he saw was just a trick of the light and a lack of sleep. Up ahead, a sign materialized out of the darkness. A faded, retro sign for an old-school gas station. A feeling of profound relief washed over him. The vintage aesthetic was a strange contrast to the modern world, but it felt real. He steered his rig off the main road and onto the gravel lot. The station looked abandoned at first glance, but the pumps glowed with an eerie green light. The air was unnaturally still, with no crickets chirping or wind wrestling the empty bags caught in the scrub brush. He pulled up to a pump, the low rumble of his rig echoing in the profound silence. As he got out and grabbed the nozzle, it felt cold in his hand, a shocking, metallic cold that had nothing to do with the night air. He filled his tank, the numbers on the pump clicking upward with a satisfying finality. The process was normal, routine, and a much-needed anchor to reality. The total came to an odd rounded number, and he saw a figure in the station's shadowy office. He waved, but the figure didn't move. He left the money on the counter, his skin crawling, and got back in his cab. He pulled his rig back onto the main highway, and the warmth of the cab felt like a welcome shield against the weirdness of the place. He checked his rearview mirror, but the gas station was gone. The turnoff was still there, but where the building had been just moments before was now just an empty stretch of desolate desert. The gravel lot, the neon sign, the shadowy figure, it was all gone, like an illusion dissolving in the desert heat. He suddenly understood the asphalt shadows. Real-life trucker horror stories whispered at truck stops. He felt the cold fuel nozzle, but the station wasn't there. The chilling discovery in the logbook left the trucker shaken, but he had to keep moving. He threw the journal back on the table, feeling like a witness to a crime that had yet to happen. Back on the road, a thick, unnatural fog rolled in, blanketing the highway and reducing visibility to mere feet. The fog was a solid, oppressive white, a wall of cotton that muffled the sound of his engine and the tires on the road. The world outside his cab was gone, replaced by an eerie, monochrome void. That's when he saw her. A young woman, just a silhouette in the swirling white. She was standing at the edge of the road, her thumb out, a silent plea for a ride. Every instinct told him to keep going, but he was gripped by a powerful, inexplicable empathy. He slowed his rig to a stop, the air brakes hissing, and opened the passenger door. She climbed in without a word, her clothes and hair completely dry despite the dense fog. Her face was pale, and her eyes were a milky white, staring out into the swirling fog as if she saw something he couldn't. She sat silently, her presence a cold weight in the passenger seat. He tried to start a conversation, to break the chilling silence, but she never responded. He felt her cold presence, a palpable feeling of dread, and her still form in the corner of his eye. A half hour passed in this way, a silent, tense ride through the endless fog. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen her before, perhaps in a picture or a dream. He checked his side mirror, and there she was, her pale face staring back at him. He turned his head to speak, but the passenger seat was empty. The chill in the cab deepened, and he realized the haunted truck stop stories on Asphalt Shadows had more truth to them than he ever imagined. Her reflection lingered in his mirror, but the seat was empty. The disappearance of the hitchhiker left the trucker cold and rattled, a lingering chill that no amount of cab heat could ward off. He was alone again, the fog still a thick, suffocating blanket. His GPS had been useless since he entered this stretch of highway, its screen a blank, unresponsive slate. He was navigating by intuition, and the old dog-eared road map he kept tucked under his seat. But even the map seemed to lie now, showing a road that was supposed to curve, but instead continued in a perfectly straight line into the gloom. Then, through the swirling white, a road sign appeared. It was old, rusted, and pointed to a town called Clarity, a name that felt like a sick joke. He had never heard of it, and a quick scan of his paper map confirmed it didn't exist. Yet the sign was there, solid and real, and the road to his right led into a new stretch of darkness. A powerful magnetic pull drew him towards it, a sinister curiosity that he couldn't fight. It felt like the road was a living thing, guiding him. He knew he should turn back, but the desire to find out what was at the end of this impossible path was too strong. He pulled his rig onto the new road, the sound of his tires changing from a hum to a low groan on the strange, cracked pavement. The fog behind him lifted as soon as he turned, as if its job was done. The new road was empty, lined with twisted, black trees that seemed to claw at the sky. He checked his side mirror, but the main highway was gone, vanished into the fog. He was on a new path, a path that wasn't on any map and led to a town that didn't exist. He had fallen for one of the classic highway horror stories, a legend that became his reality. The road led somewhere impossible, a place off any map. The new road felt ancient, as though it had existed long before the modern world. The trucker pressed on, a knot of dread tightening in his gut. The silence was absolute, broken only by the low growl of his engine. He drove for what felt like an eternity, but the mileage markers on the side of the road refused to budge. They seemed to be stuck, displaying the same number over and over again, a cruel, mocking loop. He was about to give up, to turn around and try to find the main highway again, when he saw a new marker. It was old and chipped, barely readable. Mile marker 13. A shiver went down his spine. He'd heard about this spot in the old man's stories, a place where many truckers simply vanished, their rigs left to rust on the roadside. It was a site of numerous fatal accidents, a dark legend of the road. As he passed the marker, his truck's dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, the warning lights screaming in unison. The engine sputtered and died. The cab plunged into silence and darkness. The only light now was the dim glow of the clock on his dashboard, its numbers flickering erratically. He tried to restart the rig, turning the key again and again, but nothing. The truck was a dead hulk of metal and plastic, a useless monument to his bad decision. He reached for his phone, but it was dead, the screen a black void. He was stranded, alone in the dark. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a burst of static from his CB radio. He wasn't even sure if it was on. A low, raspy voice came through the speaker, distorted and chilling. "We know you're there," it whispered. He fumbled with the dial, but the voice came back, clearer this time. "We've been waiting for you." He was living a paranormal road encounter story, a tale that had haunted him since he first heard it. The static became voices, and they knew his name. The trucker scrambled for the CB radio, but it was already off. He stared at the blank screen, his heart pounding in his ears. The voice had been so clear, so real. It was no trick of the static. He tried his phone again, hoping against hope that it had somehow come back to life. No luck, but then, as he was about to toss it aside in frustration, the screen flickered on. The battery icon was full, and on the screen, an incoming call from an unknown number. He hesitated, every fiber of his being screaming at him to ignore it, but the old man's warning echoed in his mind. The road, it watches you. Maybe this was a warning, a lifeline. He hit the answer button. A cacophony of distorted screams and garbled whispers poured from the speaker, a chilling chorus of agony and despair. He held the phone away from his ear, his hand trembling, but the sounds didn't fade. Amidst the chaos, he heard a voice, a familiar voice, pleading with him. Don't stop, ... Don't stay here, ... They're waiting, ... single quotes. It was his own voice, a twisted, warped echo of himself. He threw the phone to the floor of the cab, the screen shattering against the console. The sounds stopped immediately, leaving him in a silent, suffocating darkness. He sat there, gasping for air, trying to make sense of what just happened. The voice on the phone, ... It had been a ghost, a trapped soul from this very road, a grim warning from his own future. He was a character in one of those scary trucker stories. Real-life truckers swap at lonely diners. But this was no campfire tale. This was a direct line to his own undoing. He looked out into the impenetrable blackness, the twisted trees looming like skeletal figures, and he knew he couldn't stay. He had to keep moving, no matter what. The voice on the other end was pleading with his own voice. Panic was a cold, suffocating blanket. The trucker, now thoroughly unnerved, knew he couldn't spend another minute stranded on this cursed stretch of road. He got out of his cab, grabbing the largest wrench he could find, and started walking. He didn't know where he was going, but any direction felt better than staying put. After a few hundred yards, a structure loomed out of the darkness. It was a motel, its vintage neon sign a broken, flickering skeleton against the black sky. The nitrogen monoxide vacancy sign was a cruel joke. The place was utterly deserted. He walked up to the main office, its door ajar, swinging on a rusty hinge in a breeze that he couldn't feel. The lobby was a time capsule of the 1970s, a relic of a time before GPS and smartphones. A layer of dust coated everything, a testament to the years since the last guest. He walked down the long, covered walkway, past the rows of dark, silent rooms. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. He peered into the windows of the first room, his heart pounding. It was empty, the bed stripped bare. The next room was the same, but as he passed the third room, he saw something in the window, a fleeting movement in the darkness, a shape that seemed to be watching him. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. He looked closer, but there was nothing there, just the reflection of his own gaunt face. He moved on, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. He saw another movement, this time in the window of a different room. A shadowy figure, tall and thin, just a silhouette in the inky blackness. It stood for a moment, then seemed to melt into the shadows, a ghost in the motel's empty halls. He had stumbled into a place of asphalt shadows, mysterious disappearances, and he was in the company of the missing. They were waiting in every dark window, but he was alone. The trucker bolted from the abandoned motel, the sense of unseen eyes burning holes in his back. He didn't stop running until he was back in the relative safety of his cab. The truck was a silent, dead husk, but its enclosed space was a shield against the horrors outside. He locked the doors, his hands shaking, and stared out into the darkness. The shadows of the trees seemed to twist and writhe, and he swore he could see figures moving at the edge of his headlight's beam. He slumped back in the driver's seat, taking a deep breath to steady himself. His eyes drifted to his side mirror, and he nearly screamed. Staring back at him was not his own reflection, but a gaunt, skeletal face with hollow, burning eyes. The face was pale and stretched, a parody of a human face. Its mouth was a gaping maw, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, white light. The image was a still tableau of pure, unadulterated terror. He knew this face. It was the face from the logbook, the final drawing from the missing trucker. He squeezed his eyes shut, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. When he opened them again, the reflection in the mirror was gone. It was just his own tired, terrified face staring back. But the image was burned into his mind, a brand of fear he would never forget. He had heard about these creepy roadside encounters from asphalt shadows, but they were just stories, urban legends whispered at rest stops. He had seen the truth, and the truth was staring back at him from the glass. It was not his face staring back in the rearview mirror. The trucker sat in his cab, trying to regain his composure, the image of the phantom face seared into his memory. He needed a distraction, something, anything to break the silence. He tried the radio again, fumbling with the dials, and suddenly a new sound came through the speakers. Not static, not music, but a clean, clear voice, speaking in a calm, almost detached tone. It was a radio broadcast, a news report, but it was coming from a frequency that shouldn't exist. "This is an emergency broadcast," the voice announced, its tone devoid of urgency. "Attention to all drivers on Route 666. At approximately 3:47 a.m., a single-axle truck carrying a shipment of frozen meat will lose control and veer off the highway. The driver, a male in his early 30s, will be killed on impact." The trucker's blood ran cold. He was in his early 30s. He was in a single-axle truck. He looked at the clock on his dashboard. It read 3:45 a.m. The voice on the radio continued, detailing the gruesome particulars of the impending crash, the chilling precision of its prophecy, a kind of psychological torture. He wanted to scream, to throw the radio out the window, but he was frozen in place. The radio was narrating his own death, a premonition from a source that transcended time. He looked at the clock again, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. 3:46 a.m. He was about to become one of the many anonymous drivers who disappear on this stretch of highway, a footnote in the many highway horror stories of the road. He had only a minute left. The voice on the radio was narrating his own impending crash. The trucker had a decision to make, and less than a minute to do it. The radio voice's calm prophecy of his death felt more real than the road ahead. He slammed his foot on the brake, the rig screeching to a halt just as the clock turned to 3:47 a.m. He sat there, his heart pounding, waiting for the impact that never came. The prophecy was wrong. He had escaped. A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washed over him, followed by a new, chilling thought. The road wasn't trying to kill him. It was trying to trap him. The radio broadcast was a test, a cruel psychological trick to make him stop. He looked in his rearview mirror and saw a familiar sight. The ghostly lights of the Phantom truck from Chapter 2, waiting behind him in the distance. He looked forward, and up ahead, another sign appeared out of the darkness. This one for a gas station, a different one from the last, but with the same eerie, timeless feel. The sign read, "The last stop," he understood now. This wasn't a gas station. It was a trap, a nexus point for all the lost souls who had fallen for the road's tricks. The phantom truck, the vanishing gas station, the hitchhiker, the motel's shadows, they were all part of the same cruel game. He was a rat in a maze, and the road was the cruel, calculating hand. He looked at the fuel gauge on his dashboard. It was full, but he knew with chilling certainty that it was a lie, a fleeting illusion. He had a choice: stay put and risk his sanity, or keep moving and risk whatever awaited him down this terrible path. He realized the haunted truck stop stories on Asphalt Shadows were not about places that held ghosts, but places that were the ghosts themselves, built by the fear and despair of all those who came before him. He wasn't just a visitor. He was part of their endless wait. The trucker knew he had to keep moving. The phantom gas station was a trap, and the phantom truck was gaining on him. He had to trust his rig's fuel gauge, even if he knew it was a lie, a simple instrument in a world of complex, supernatural tricks. He put his foot on the accelerator, and the truck roared to life, a small victory against the looming dread. He drove on, the silence of the night feeling heavier than ever. He kept his eyes on the rearview mirror, but the phantom truck was gone, as if it were a predator that had just released its prey confident it would find it again later. He had been driving for an hour, the road unchanging, the scenery a blur of dark trees and black sky, when the engine suddenly began to sputter. A profound, bone-deep sense of fear washed over him. The fuel gauge still read full. He tried to tell himself it was just a mechanical issue, a dirty fuel filter, or a clogged line, but he knew the truth. The road was draining his tank. It was a cruel, psychological trick, a way to force him to stop and face whatever waited for him in the darkness. The engine coughed and died, the truck shuddering to a complete stop. He was stranded again, but this time it was different. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was a direct, targeted attack. He was a pawn in a larger game, and his rig was just a piece of the board. The road had stolen his fuel, a literal robbery of his only means of escape. He had heard about these scary trucker stories real-life truckers told, but they were about haunted diners and lonely roads, not about the road itself stealing your fuel. He felt the shudder as the engine died, miles from anywhere. The trucker's engine was dead, the silence thick and oppressive. He sat in his cab, listening, waiting. He had to assume the road would make its next move. He was right. From the thick, black trees that lined the highway, a sound began to rise, a low, guttural chanting. It was a choir, but the voices were not human. They were distorted, inhuman, a chorus of gravel and broken glass. They sang in no discernible language, their song a melody of madness and despair. It was coming from all directions at once, a chilling surround sound that seemed to press in on him from the darkness. He looked into the forest, but all he could see were the twisted silhouettes of trees, their branches like skeletal hands. The sound was getting louder, the voices growing in number, a legion of the damned singing their hearts out in the middle of nowhere. It felt like a war hymn, a battle cry from a war long since forgotten. He realized with a chilling certainty that these were the lost souls of the road, the truckers and travelers who had vanished here, their final moments of terror, captured and replayed for the next victim. He was listening to his own future, a preview of the chorus he would join. He had heard about these paranormal road encounters before, but they were always about a single ghost or a single event, not a chorus of them. The song changed pitch, becoming a dissonant, screaming crescendo that tore at his eardrums. He put his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his head, a voice that was both everywhere and nowhere. It was a sound of pure terror and profound agony, and it was getting closer. The voices began to move, a slow, deliberate march towards his rig. He couldn't see them, but he could feel them, a cold, creeping dread that had a physical weight. They sang a song of war and madness, just for him. The chilling, inhuman choir continued its march, the discordant voices closer now. The trucker was trapped in his cab, a helpless target. He had no power, no fuel, and no way to escape. He looked out into the darkness, his eyes strained, trying to make out a shape in the forest, a face in the crowd. But there was nothing, just the thick, impenetrable darkness and the terrifying chorus of the lost. He gripped the steering wheel, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Then he saw it, not in the forest, but in the middle of the road, standing perfectly still in the beam of his headlights. It was a man, tall and impossibly thin, dressed in what looked like an old, tattered highway patrol uniform. His arms were long and spindly, his legs a pair of stick figures. But it was his face that was the most terrifying thing. He had no face, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where his features should have been. A void of a face, with two empty sockets where his eyes should have been. The faceless man raised a hand, a gesture of warning, a sign to stop. The trucker, in a moment of sheer, unadulterated terror, put his foot on the brake, even though the truck was already dead. The tires screeched on the pavement, a sound that seemed to tear the night in two. The truck shuddered, the movement causing the faceless man to dissolve into the air, a wisp of smoke and shadow. He had nearly hit a phantom, a ghost of the road. He had seen the face of a creepy roadside encounters from asphalt shadows, and it was empty. The faceless man's disappearance was just another trick, another fleeting terror designed to push the trucker's sanity to the brink. He was a puppet, and the road was pulling the strings. He sat in his dead rig, the silence returning, thick and oppressive. He knew he couldn't stay. He got out of the cab, grabbed his gear, and started walking again, leaving the silent, hulking truck behind. He was a lone figure on a long, straight road, the darkness of the trees, a physical presence on either side. He had to be close to some kind of civilization, a town, a rest stop, anything that wasn't this desolate stretch of hell. He walked for what felt like hours, the moon a sliver in the sky, a cold, uncaring eye watching his slow, deliberate march. He was getting exhausted, his legs aching, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. He saw something up ahead, a flickering light in the distance. A diner, maybe? A gas station? Hope, a long-forgotten feeling, surged through him. He walked faster, a desperate, frantic pace, and as he got closer, the details of the scene began to emerge. The flickering neon sign, the rusted pumps, the old pickup truck parked out front. It was the same abandoned gas station from Chapter 3. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart sinking into his stomach. This was impossible. He had left this place hours ago. He had filled his tank here, had seen it disappear in his rearview mirror. But here it was, standing solid and real, a cruel monument to his sanity's fraying. He was trapped in asphalt shadows. Real-life trucker horror stories time loop, a paradox with no beginning and no end. He was driving the same stretch of asphalt, again and again. The trucker's mind reeled with the impossibility of the time loop. He was walking a road that went nowhere, leading him back to places he had already been. He turned and started walking back the way he came, hoping to find his rig and break the endless cycle. The moon was a pale, cold sliver, a silent witness to his torment. He had walked for only a few minutes when he saw them in the distance, a pair of flashing red and blue lights, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. A police car. A rush of relief washed over him. He was saved. He ran towards the lights, waving his arms, desperate to flag the officer down. As he got closer, he realized the lights were wrong. They were not the bright, sharp flash of a modern patrol car, but a slow, rhythmic, almost lazy strobe. The car itself was an old, beat-up sedan from the 1970s, the kind you only see in old movies. It was rolling silently down the highway, its engine a low, ghostly hum he couldn't hear. There was no one in the driver's seat. The car stopped in the middle of the road, its lights still strobing, bathing the darkness in a silent, pulsing rhythm of red and blue. The trucker stopped a few feet away, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw a figure in the passenger seat, a gaunt, skeletal form, wearing a tattered uniform. The figure raised a hand, a silent command. The trucker knew what it was. It was a ghost, a guardian of the road, a remnant of a time when this highway was patrolled by flesh and blood. He had walked into another one of the many highway horror stories, a legend made real. He slowly backed away, his eyes locked on the specter in the car. The silent patrol car faded to nothing, leaving no trace. The trucker's flight was a frantic, desperate thing. The phantom police car was gone, but the image of the skeletal officer was seared into his mind. He ran until his lungs burned, until he saw a small, dilapidated gas station a few hundred yards off the main road. The sign was rusted, the paint peeling, but the restroom door was slightly ajar, a dark promise of shelter. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The air inside was stale and thick with the smell of mold and decay. He fumbled for a light switch, but none existed. The only light was a single flickering bulb above a sink, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He was exhausted, his body trembling with a fear that had gone beyond simple adrenaline. He went to the sink, splashed water on his face, and looked up into the mirror. The glass was cracked and stained, a web of lines distorting his reflection. He stared at his own face, a hollow-eyed, gaunt parody of the man he once was. But as he watched, the reflection began to change. His skin grew pale and translucent, his eyes became two empty sockets, and his features melted away into a smooth, featureless expanse. The man in the mirror was a corpse, a gaunt, skeletal version of himself. He was the faceless man from Chapter 15. His heart stopped. This wasn't a hallucination. This was his future. The road was showing him what he would become, a ghost trapped in the endless cycle of the highway. He was looking at his own fate, his final form as one of the many asphalt shadows, mysterious disappearances. The man in the mirror was already a ghost of the road. The trucker backed away from the mirror, a strangled cry caught in his throat. He had seen the truth, and the truth was that he was already a ghost. He ran out of the restroom, stumbling back into the open air. The light from the single bulb was a pathetic beacon in the vast, suffocating darkness. He had to keep moving, not because he could escape, but because the alternative was to stay put and become one with the road, a forgotten relic of its long, terrifying history. He needed to find his rig, to go back to the source, to the beginning of his torment. He was running, a desperate, breathless sprint, when he stumbled over something half buried in the dirt. It was a metal lockbox, rusted and covered in a thick layer of dust. It was the kind truckers used to secure their logbooks and their valuables. He pried it open with a rock, the sound of the metal groaning in the silence. Inside was a single leather-bound journal. It was the same journal from the rest stop, the logbook of the missing trucker. He flipped through the pages, past the frantic scribbles and the wild drawings, to the final chilling entry he had missed. The handwriting was a barely legible scrawl, smeared with what looked like old, dry blood. The mirror, it read, "It's not a reflection. It's a key. You look into the mirror, and you see what you are. A ghost. You're already gone. The road took you. The man with no face is the man you're about to become." The trucker's blood ran cold. The final entry wasn't a warning. It was a desperate, chilling confession. This wasn't a scary trucker story's real-life mystery. It was a suicide note. The final entry wasn't a warning. It was a suicide note. The realization hit the trucker with the force of a physical blow. The logbook wasn't a warning from the past. It was a desperate message from his own future. He was already a ghost, and the road was his prison. The faceless man was not a phantom. He was his own final form, an empty, hollow echo of a life that was already over. The time loop, the phantom truck, the disappearing gas station, it all made sense. They weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to make him understand that he was already dead. He looked up from the logbook, his eyes now wide with a chilling, dead calm. He had to face it, whatever it was. He walked back to his rig, a silent, determined march. The darkness seemed to part for him, a silent respect for a man who had finally embraced his fate. He reached the cab and saw him, standing by the driver's side door, the faceless man. He was tall, impossibly thin, his body a gaunt, shadowy outline against the black sky. The twin points of light that were his eyes glowed with an eerie, familiar white light. The man reached out a long, spindly arm, its hand a collection of impossibly long fingers. He felt the cold, a profound and unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The cold was a physical presence, a creeping dread that had a face. The trucker, with a chilling calm, reached out and grabbed the man's hand. He wasn't scared anymore. He was just tired. He was ready to join the paranormal road encounters that had become his life. The cold had a face, and it was reaching for him. The trucker's grip on the faceless man's hand was the final tragic act. He felt the cold, a profound and bottomless chill that had nothing to do with the night air. It was the cold of space, of death, of a forgotten grave. It was the cold of the road. As he held the man's hand, his body began to dissolve, a slow, deliberate fade. His skin turned translucent, his flesh a ghostly haze. He felt his spirit being pulled from his body, a gentle, inexorable force drawing him towards the endless expanse of the road. His rig, once a symbol of freedom, now seemed to solidify into a permanent rusted monument. He was no longer a person. He was a memory, an echo, another lost soul absorbed into the legend of Route 666. He looked back one last time, his ghostly eyes seeing not a road, but a vast, moving river of asphalt, a black river of ghosts, of phantom trucks, and vanished travelers. He was one of them now, a silent driver on a silent highway. His final destination was not a town, not a rest stop, but the infinite, horrifying loop of the road itself. He had joined the asphalt, shadows, mysterious disappearances. His truck became one with the legend, another part of the story. The highway had found another soul to add to its long convoy. The legend of Route 666 isn't about a single event or a single ghost. It's about a living, breathing entity, a stretch of asphalt that has become a collector of souls. Every trucker who vanishes, every traveler who disappears is not lost but absorbed. They become part of an endless, silent convoy, driving the same dark road for all eternity. Their stories, their screams, their final moments of terror, ... They're all etched into the highway itself, a permanent echo that waits for the next lonely traveler. The road is not a way out, it's a trap, and you're driving on it right now. The question isn't whether you'll find your way back, but whether you'll ever truly be able to leave.